1 week before marrying Henry, his dream girl got divorced. He brought her in front of me and called off the engagement. Ava, I don't want to settle. No matter how hard you try, you'll never be as good as her. I calmly walked away, cut off my long hair, and changed into my biker gear, returned to the battlefield that belonged to me. He laughed with his friends. Who would like such a flashy woman anyway? She's definitely not marriage material. Until suddenly, a photo started circulating around my friends. On a motorcycle, a slender, fair hand pressed against the chest of one of the wildest sons of Beijing's elite. His tattooed, vein-popping arm wrapped tightly around the woman's waist. The testosterone practically oozed from the screen. Finally, Henry called me. Ava. Who is he? The reply came in the lazy voice of another man. Hey, ex-bro, let me introduce myself. I'm her legal husband. Chapter 01. I was at the bridal shop for my final fitting. In half a month, I was supposed to marry Henry. Even though the dress was custom-made, it was a bit tight at the chest and waist. As I went into the fitting room to adjust, I started to overhear voices from outside growing clearer. Hey, did you hear? Henry's ex-girlfriend Elena got divorced and returned to China. I remember when she broke up with Henry 3 years ago. He was absolutely devastated. Yeah, if Ava hadn't shown up and helped him through that dark time, he probably wouldn't have made it. Who's Ava, anyway? Beijing's most rebellious princess. Who would have thought she'd actually settle down for Henry? But now that Elena's back, do you think the wedding will still happen? The invitations have already gone out. If they don't get married, it'll be such a joke. After their voices faded, I took off the ill-fitting dress. I called Henry, but someone else answered. Among the noisy background, I clearly heard his voice, trying to imitate greatness. Ava can't even compare to even one finger of Elena. Someone added. Ava used to be known as the hardest girl to chase, the hardest to tame. Bro, you should be grateful. Henry chuckled coldly. Hard to tame? She's been circling around me like a dog for the past 3 years. Guess she finally chased me into marriage. Another voice asked. Bro, you don't like her? Henry replied coldly. Would you like a dog? The crowd continued. Then why are you marrying her? The air suddenly grew silent. After a long pause, I heard Henry's voice. She's such a wild one, but it's kind of fun seeing her behave. I hung up the phone. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, my long, straight black hair, and the tattoos that used to be on my arms and collarbone, now washed away. I suddenly laughed. I've had enough of pretending to be a good girl. Chapter 02. Henry hadn't been home for a week. I listed the wedding house on a real estate platform. Every brick and tile in that house was bought by me, but I don't want any of it anymore. After I finished, I finally got his call asking to meet. He had arranged the gathering, but he was the last to arrive. When he came in, he had the delicate and pitiful Elena following behind him. She looked about 50% like me now. He tightly held her hand, as if afraid someone would bully her, putting on an overly protective act. The air instantly grew quiet. No one dared to speak. Everyone's eyes turned toward me. I didn't say a word, just looked down at the red string bracelet on my wrist that was about to wear out. I curled my lips slightly. It wasn't until Henry brought her in front of me that he spoke. Ava, I'm not going through with the wedding. I lifted my eyelids, calmly looking at him. You're calling off the engagement? He pulled Elena closer, looking at her with affectionate indulgence. Elena is back, and I don't want to settle. No matter how much you imitate her, you'll never be as good as her. Do you understand? I don't love you. I nodded. Okay. He looked at me in disbelief, as if he couldn't understand why I was reacting so calmly. You know, our engagement was arranged by our parents. I've loved Elena for 5 years, waited for her for 3. She's been hurt so badly, and I want to give her a home. I was getting a little impatient, grabbing my bag from beside me. Okay, are you done? Henry was taken aback and stood there silently for a while before continuing. I'll handle my side of the family. As for your side, you deal with them yourself. The wedding next week is off. All right. I stood up and walked toward the door. Just as I reached the door, Henry suddenly called out to me. Ava? I turned back. He was still standing where he was, but I noticed his other hand was clenched tightly at his side. Is there something else? He frowned. Don't you have anything to say to me? I thought about it. Honestly, I wanted to tell him, I envy you. Your dream lover can still return, but mine never will. I finally spoke softly. Congratulations on your wedding. As I closed the door, I heard voices from behind. No way. Is that really Ava's reaction? Henry bro, didn't you say she was head over heels in love with you? Why didn't she even make a scene? Shut up. It was Henry's angry voice. I didn't look back. I should have realized long ago. Henry was never really him. He would never have abandoned me to look at someone else. Chapter 03. After leaving, I went into a hair salon. I cut off the long hair I had kept for 3 years. When my sharp blue short hair appeared, I felt like I was finally becoming myself again. I also had a string of letters tattooed on my wrist again, Je ne recule jamais, French, meaning, I never retreat. Finally, I went to a shop I hadn't stepped into for 3 years. Lucas, get my bike out. A shirtless, muscular guy came out of the shop. He looked at me in shock, his eyes turning red. It took him a while to gather himself. Ava, sis? Yeah, it's me, a big guy, nearly 6 feet tall, looked me up and down, a little tongue-tied. Sis, how come you're here? I looked at the 2 bikes displayed in the most prominent spot. One white, one black. I smiled. They're still here, sis. I've been wiping down those 2 bikes every day. They're as good as new. You can ride them anytime. Where do you want to go? Should I call the guys? I shook my head. Just bring it out. I want to go for a ride alone. All right. When I got on, the long-lost feeling surged back to me. I hadn't ridden in such a long time. It felt like if I didn't ride, I could forget what happened that summer. I turned to glance at the other black Kawasaki and thought of him. Lucas followed my gaze and his eyes reddened. I've been waiting for Dominic too. The Kawasaki has been here, untouched, just sitting next to yours. I keep thinking, one day, they'll both be back on the road again. Sis, it's been 3 years. I've waited for you. Do you think he'll come back too? I paused for a moment. So, it's been 3 years already. They say if you listen to the clock that ticks backward 1,000 times, you'll see the person you want to meet. I've listened to it all. Why hasn't Dominic come back yet? I turned my head, my nose stinging with emotion, but I still softly comforted him. That's just a lie. The dead can't come back to life. Then, I started up the bike. Lucas didn't know. I had already listened 10,000 times. I sped all the way to the mountaintop. Looking at the scenery below, I shouted, Dominic, I listened to you and tried to get married properly. So why haven't you come back? Tears rolled down my cheeks. You liar. You clearly said you wanted to see me in a wedding dress. Look, in the end, this dress is only for you to see, but it doesn't fit. I've been eating well, living well, so why doesn't it fit? Can't you hold me? The wind is so strong, and I'm so tired. On the empty mountaintop, there was nothing but the boundless sea of stars. The moon cast its quiet light, illuminating the entire land. Everything became gentle. Behind me, I heard some rustling sounds. I turned around sharply, but no one was there. Turns out, it was just the sound of insects. Chapter 04. I gathered my emotions and descended the mountain. But suddenly, the black Kawasaki was gone. Lucas! I quickly got off my bike and shouted toward the shop. Where's the bike? Who rode off with it? A horn sounded behind me. My heart raced faster than ever before. For some reason, tears had already started spilling out of my eyes. I slowly turned around, gently pressing my hand to my chest. Under the dim streetlight, Dominic leaned against the motorcycle, dressed in black from head to toe, his eyebrows an expression as wild and rebellious as ever. He raised an eyebrow at me. My little firecracker. Why are you still such a crybaby? Chapter 05. It felt like time had returned to the first time I met him. My parents had a huge fight over me not being obedient, and they gave me a severe beating. All I said was that they should stop tormenting each other and just get divorced already. What was wrong with that? I ran out, hiding by myself, crying. Halfway through my tears, I heard a lazy, casual laugh. Who's this little firecracker hiding here and crying? Dominic, with his hands behind his head, slowly got up and sat next to me, handing me a tissue. Crying alone is too lonely. You don't know me, so I can just be a quiet listener. That year, we were both 15. I never told him why I was crying, but he stayed with me the whole afternoon. Later, I got to know him, the school bully from the neighboring school. I heard he was vicious in fights, also a wild child without a dad. Maybe it was fate, but we gradually became close. He would take me to the mountaintop to watch the stars. He introduced me to all of his friends. He gave me the care and love I never received at home. And he told me to always be true to myself, because some people would love me just the way I am. He would always appear in front of me whenever I had a fight with my family, gently holding me, letting me vent all my emotions. He would also stand up for me, teaching a lesson to those who spoke ill of me, saying I wasn't a good girl. He said, "Eva, no one can define a person's worth, and no one can judge you. You are who you are." I, too, would stand up for him when people called him a bastard. When he didn't feel like talking, I would sit quietly by his side and remind him that he wasn't alone. I said, "Dominic, you don't need to be anything specific because your existence alone has meaning." Everyone said that he, so rebellious and cold, only became gentle in front of me. It was as if two people floating in the depths of the sea had finally found their lifeboat. Dominic and I grew closer and closer. After graduating from high school, we fell in love. That night, a group of us rode our bikes to the mountaintop, cheering to celebrate adulthood. Then, he quietly grabbed my hand from behind the group and pulled me away, running. In the whole world, it was just the sound of our breaths. Dominic, doesn't this feel like we're running away together? I still remember that summer, the roundest moon, the brightest stars, the most beautiful sound of cicadas, and the most sincere eyes of a young boy, under the starry sky. We embraced and kissed. It felt like that moment would last forever. Chapter 06. Dominic, you're finally back. I've missed you so much. My voice trembled, my body even shaking slightly. Why are you crying? Come here. Let me hold you. I rushed over in big strides, but all I saw was Lucas pushing a bike toward me. Sis, why are you crying? Didn't Dominic always say his bike would never be left alone with yours? I saw you riding off, so I pushed out the black one and started it up. Oh. So, it was all just my imagination. I turned my back to him and wiped away my tears. People say you shouldn't meet someone too amazing when you're young, or else everyone you meet after will just pale in comparison. Maybe I was too attached. It's been 3 years, and I still haven't faced reality. I'm still praying for a miracle to happen. Chapter 07. When I returned, everyone was waiting for me. Seeing my blue hair and motorcycle gear, my mom was furious. "Look at what you've become. You don't even resemble a proper girl anymore. No wonder Henry doesn't want you." I stood at the door. Suddenly, I didn't want to go in. I turned to leave, but my dad called after me. "Where do you think you're going? Get in here. Call his family and apologize. Tell them you'll marry no one but Henry. The wedding invitations have already gone out. There's no reason not to get married. And get rid of that ridiculous color on your head. The Henry family doesn't like flashy women. Got it?" I slowly walked up to them. I smiled. Why should I apologize? He's the one who wants to give his ex a home. He's the one who called off the wedding. What's wrong with me letting him go? My dad stood up and slapped me across the face. Ungrateful. He's confused. But are you too? Why can't you use your brain? Do you think a family like Henry's would ever let a divorced woman through their doors? My face burned with pain. He continued, "So what if he has a woman on the side? Who doesn't turn a blind eye as long as it doesn't threaten your position as the official wife? What's got you so upset?" I gently touched my cheek, tugging at my lips. "You two can each play your own games. But sorry, I can't." My dad's chest heaved with anger, and he grabbed the cup on the table and threw it at me. "So a wild child died. Big deal. It's been 3 years, and you're still hanging on like this?" Are you going to stay widowed for him your whole life? Ava, I'll say it one more time, this wedding is happening. Even if you have to die, you'll die married to the Henry family. Chapter 08. I didn't dodge the cup, and as it grazed my face, it left a cut near my brow. Suddenly, memories came flooding back. After Dominic fell off the cliff in that race, I developed severe depression, and my wrists were covered in scars from self-harm. When the servants found me and saved me, my parents said I was being dramatic. How could a rich girl, blessed with everything, end up with an illness like that? They didn't understand me, and they didn't care, because they had already built their separate lives with other families when I was very young. I never understood, if they didn't love each other, why did they even bother having me? Then, when the company faced a crisis, they decided to marry me off to the Henry family. I didn't want to, but they threw Henry's photo at me and told me to stop pretending. If I really didn't want to live, then just go die. I lowered my head and caught a glimpse of that photo. For a moment, I thought Dominic had come back. They looked so alike, especially those eyes, like a drowning person grabbing onto a lifeline. I agreed to the meeting. I even dyed my hair black, just like they said, because the Henry family didn't like flashy women. I wanted to stay by his side. Even if it was just to look at that face, it was enough for me. But I never expected that Henry would be the first to leave me his contact information. He made the first move, and so we got together. Later, I found out that he was just using me as a stand-in, too. We were both getting what we needed from each other. So, when he asked me to grow out my hair, I did. When he said he liked me in long white cotton dresses, I wore them. When he said he didn't like me smoking, I quit. He even asked me to stop riding my motorcycle, and I listened to him. To others, the once rebellious me had tamed myself for him, loving him to death. Even Henry thought so. What could I do? Without that face, I wouldn't even have had the courage to keep living. So, no matter how many times he crossed my line, I accepted it, because every time I looked at him, I felt like Dominic was still by my side, never having left. Until his dream lover came back, and then his eyes were only for someone else. That's when I finally woke up from this dream. No matter how alike, Henry was never him. Chapter 09. Before bed, I unexpectedly received a call from Henry. Your parents called mine. I remembered how earlier, I had posted my first motorcycle photo in 3 years on my social media. A friend commented below, "So cool." Not long after, under that comment, Henry left his own reply. Who would like such a flashy woman? Definitely not marriage material. So I cut him off. Don't worry, you're not the only one who doesn't want this wedding. I felt a little regretful, though, because I would never see those tender eyes looking at me again. Henry fell silent. Then he chuckled bitterly, his tone sharp. Ava, if you can put up with Elena, I could reluctantly marry you. But don't expect me to love you. Got it? After all, it's just to please the parents. You love me so much, and your family needs mine. I could fulfill your dream. I touched the string of English letters on my wrist and smiled slowly. Henry, if you're really going to marry me, does Elena know? He didn't respond. Only the sound of his quickened breathing remained. Henry, I know you're using me as a stand-in for Elena. Funny enough, I'm doing the same. Do you know when you look the most like him? I smiled, remembering Dominic's casual grin. It's when you don't say anything and just look at me, even though you're just looking at someone else through me. I'm not sad at all. Just seeing that face already makes me happy. I softened my tone and said gently, so, even though you made me do a lot of things I didn't want to, I never really got mad at you. But like you said, no matter how much I try, I'll never be like her. And no matter how similar you look, you're not the same person. So, we're both stand-ins. I don't owe you, and I don't love you. This wedding is not going to. Before I could finish, Henry abruptly hung up the phone. Chapter 10. I took 2 tablets of astaxanthin. Only in my dreams can I see Dominic again. Back to those 4 years when we loved each other the most. After the college entrance exams, we officially got together in front of all our friends. Do you understand? Walking down the street, holding hands with the person you love, drinking bubble tea, watching a movie, even if we didn't talk, just quietly looking at each other. The air felt sweet. We could finally ride our beloved motorcycles, racing together through the open world. Lucas once said, "Dominic and Ava, they're the most perfect couple I've ever seen." Just standing there, they look like a scene from a romance drama. I praised him, telling him to keep talking like that. Dominic, with his hands in his pockets, would lean against his bike, lazily watching me joke around with our group of friends. Later, we went to the same university, and we started building a racing team together, participating in competitions. Honestly, he was incredibly attractive, always making appearances on the confession wall, with girls handing him love letters after class. He was worried I'd get jealous, so he bribed the campus radio station to read love letters he wrote to me every day. I'd get goosebumps, and he'd pull me close, laughing. "I'll never get tired of writing. I'll write to you every day from now on." A lot of people thought we didn't seem like the kind of couple that would last, but we ended up staying together for 4 whole years. Eventually, my parents found out about our relationship. They called me home that day, furious, demanding that I break up with that bastard. I refused. My dad grabbed a stick, ready to beat me. I lifted my chin, stubborn. "You both have your own families now. All these years, you haven't cared about me, so what gives you the right to suddenly interfere in my life? I'm so sick of your hypocrisy. What am I to you? A tool? A commodity? I'm your father. I gave you life, and you'll never escape your fate." My mom added, "I've been too lenient with you. That's why you've lost all respect and dare to say such things. Is it that bastard who taught you this?" Just as the stick was about to hit me, Dominic appeared and saved me. He pulled me up and shielded me behind him. "All these years, you've never cared for her. She hasn't received your love. Yet you expect her to repay your kindness. Why? Why should she have to obey your every word? This is the girl I love. If you don't love her, I will. If you don't want her, I do." That day, he held my hand and led me out of that house. We didn't say a word, but he held me all night. We had promised each other that we'd get married after graduation. But near graduation, I suddenly started being followed for no reason. Sometimes, even flower pots would fall from above while I walked on the street. Dominic also began to seem distracted. One day, he suddenly asked me, "If one day I'm not here anymore, what would you do?" "I'd follow you." I wasn't joking. Before the age of 15, I had no family, no friends. I was rebellious and wild, not knowing what it meant to live. After meeting him, he became my salvation. I couldn't imagine what I would do without Dominic. "Don't," he sighed, "even if I'm not around. You have to live well. Find someone who loves you. Get married. Have kids. Understand?" I wrapped my arms tighter around his waist. "What are you talking about? The only person I'll ever wear a wedding dress for is you. I'll never marry anyone else." "Don't be stubborn. I'm serious." "Why are you being so serious? Tell me, do you have someone else behind my back?" He cleared his throat, gently stroking my hair. "My princess, I wouldn't dare. You better not dare, or I'll marry someone else and let you suffer chasing me." It was just an angry retort. He chuckled softly. "If there ever comes a day when you really get married and the groom isn't me, I'll come and crash the wedding." Dominic said he wanted to win a race for me, to propose to me in front of everyone, with a trophy and a ring, giving me the grandest proposal. But I never expected that he'd never return from that race. In the dream, the scene shifted to a misty forest. All I could remember was the deafening cheers, the scorching summer heat, and the news on the big screen, him falling off the cliff, amid the sky full of flames. At that moment, there was no more sound in my ears. Chapter 11. Dominic! I woke up with a jolt, my back soaked in sweat. The phone rang. It was Lucas calling. "Sis, there's a race on the mountain road this afternoon. Everyone's gonna be there. Are you coming?" "I'm coming. It's not my home ground, but I think I need to start moving forward. This race is just a small one. There's an international race the day after tomorrow. You wanna come?" The others have already gone ahead. I leaned against the bike and lit a cigarette. Yeah, I should practice. I'll compete. I heard there will be a lot of famous racers, especially this dark horse from overseas. He's been performing incredibly well, but unfortunately, he never takes off his helmet, so no one knows what he looks like. If I meet him, I'll ask for an autograph. I exhaled a puff of smoke and teased him. Look at you. So starstruck. I'll win you a trophy next time. Lucas's eyes turned red again. Sis, seeing you like this makes me so happy. I patted his shoulder. After finishing the last drag of my cigarette, I turned around and saw Henry. Our eyes met, and I noticed his gaze brighten. Ava? I didn't plan on responding. I crushed the cigarette under my shoe, but he grabbed my wrist. Let's talk. He stood in front of me, blocking the sun against the light. Only his shadow remained. I quietly looked at him, such a similar face. What a shame. He's not Dominic. Don't look at me like that. Henry suddenly raised his voice. Ava, how dare you lie to me? He seemed really angry, but I didn't understand why. I pulled my hand free and said slowly, Henry, shouldn't you be happy? Henry's expression darkened as he blocked my way, gritting his teeth. Happy? I'm a stand-in, and I'm supposed to be happy? Ava, do you even have a conscience? His eyes were filled with fury. No wonder you always looked at me like you'd lost and found something precious. No wonder you often stared at me, eyes red, on the verge of tears. I actually thought you really loved me. I even foolishly agreed to the arranged marriage between our families out of sympathy. I feel like an idiot. I let him finish speaking before I replied. Henry, weren't you using me as a stand-in too? Your dream lover is back. You don't need to poison yourself with me anymore. The stand-in game was over. He took a step closer, and I could feel that he was about to crush my shoulders in the next second. So I instinctively stepped back a few paces. Even if you were a stand-in, didn't you become obedient to me? Would you have changed for him? I thought about it and answered him very seriously. No, I only hoped that if I ever really got married, he would keep his promise and crash the wedding. It was the last piece of obsession I held onto for myself. Did you never like me at all? I looked up at him, calm. You don't like me, and I don't like you. Isn't that fair? He paused, his brow furrowing deeply. Of course it's not fair. Ava, you were just a dog at my side. 6 days until the wedding. You'll regret it. I won't, I said. Chapter 12. I packed my bags, boarded a plane to Shanghai. 4 days until the wedding. My parents still refused to call it off, holding on to a sliver of hope that Henry and I might reconcile. I looked down and touched the red string I'd worn for 7 years. I thought to myself, once the race is over, I'll go back and completely sever ties with that estranged family. I finally understood, some parents just don't love their children. I made peace with myself. Lucas picked me up at the hotel. I heard that the racer is staying here too. You might run into him. I smiled. Are you his fanboy? Lucas scratched his head. I just think some of his techniques remind me of Dominic. My heart skipped a beat. Lucas quickly changed the subject. Sis, let me take you in. Everyone really wants to see you. They'll be so happy knowing you came to watch their race. We arrived at the venue just before the race was about to start. At the track, I saw a lot of familiar faces. These were people who used to follow Dominic. Most of them had difficult pasts, and it was Dominic who pulled them out of the abyss. He gave them a purpose to strive for in life. There, the one in the black motorcycle gear, on the black bike. Lucas pointed someone out to me. He was a bit far away, so it was hard to see clearly. I looked over. Coincidentally, the person in the helmet turned his head as well. It felt strange. I had a strong feeling. My hands started shaking, and my heart felt like it was about to leap out of my throat. The race is starting. Sis! He was the first to take off, and then, he sped ahead like he had nothing to lose. Suddenly, I remembered the rally 3 years ago, and what Dominic had said to me before the race. He said he would propose to me with the championship trophy. I stared blankly at the black figure racing on the track. My heart felt both heavy and tight. Chapter 13. I think I need an answer, whether it's him or not. I just want to see the face under the helmet. I grabbed Lucas and rushed to the podium. The wait for those next few minutes was more agonizing than anything I'd ever experienced. It was like waiting for a ship at an airport. I knew the outcome, but I still couldn't let go, until the big screen showed that he had crossed the finish line and won the championship. He had a foreign name. I watched as the camera switched, showing him pressing his index and middle fingers to his lips and throwing a kiss into the air. In that instant, I felt like that kiss had landed on my face. My skin felt hot. He walked slowly to the backstage area with the staff. I pulled some strings to get back there too. I walked up to him. I knew it was rude, but I really needed to see him. I asked him if he could take off his helmet. He didn't move, just stood there in front of me. Even his build was so similar. My heart was pounding uncontrollably. Finally, he spoke. Sorry. At that moment, everything around me turned cold. So, it really wasn't him, was it? I suddenly remembered that summer, when Dominic asked me what I would do if he wasn't here anymore. I said I would follow him, but I hadn't followed through. I lowered my head, my lips trembling. Finally, all hope was gone. I turned to leave, but suddenly, someone grabbed my wrist. I looked down, and my gaze traveled from his distinct knuckles to the veins on his wrist. There, he wore a red string identical to the one on my wrist. It was worn and frayed. In that instant, my mind went completely blank, but a tear fell onto his hand. I watched as he undid the helmet with one hand, and then, the face I had longed for day and night appeared before me. Even the curve of his lips was exactly the same. Dominic. My Dominic. I missed you so much. So much. But when I opened my mouth, no sound came out. I finally understood what it means to be so overwhelmed with emotion that you can't speak. 3 years had passed, and it seemed like he hadn't changed at all. He was still the person I remembered. And yet, he also seemed different. Otherwise, why was my vision so blurry? Dominic stood under the lights. A golden halo cast over him. Smiling as he looked at me, he curled his lips and said, "My little firecracker. What's wrong? Don't recognize me anymore?" I couldn't hold it back any longer. I threw myself into his arms, crying uncontrollably. Why? Why did it take you so long to come back? I heard my little darling was getting married, and the groom wasn't me. Of course I had to come back, to crash the wedding. He wrapped his arms around me and kissed my hair, but I could hear it, the faint tremble and choke in his voice. Chapter 14. I held him tighter, letting the tears flow without stopping, terrified that in the next second, I'd realize this was all just a dream, an illusion. I was so scared. So, even if it was just a hallucination, please let me wake up a little later. I'm sorry. I promised I'd propose to you with the championship trophy. I'm 3 years late. Are you mad at me? I shook my head. No, as long as you came back. I don't need anything else. I just need you. At the award ceremony that day, Dominic gave me the trophy and a long overdue ring. I looked at him from the audience. Now, he overlapped with the Dominic of years ago. A promise delayed by 3 years. I finally waited for a perfect ending. Chapter 15. That night, we transformed years of longing into action. Again and again, we claimed each other through sweat and tears. Even when we were exhausted, we didn't want to stop. Finally, in his arms, he slowly began to tell me what had happened over the past few years. It was all so dramatic. He and Henry looked so alike because they truly were brothers. Dominic's mother was also a wealthy heiress who fell in love with Dominic's father. But Henry's mother interfered, drugged his father, and used her pregnancy to secure her place in the family. Dominic's mother couldn't tolerate the betrayal and left, only to discover she was pregnant. Later, when Henry's mother found out about their existence, she secretly oppressed them. This gradually stirred a desire for revenge in Dominic's mother. So, she took control of Dominic, forcing him to go abroad to take over his uncle's business and strike at Henry's family company. Dominic didn't want to. Because of me. So Dominic's mother targeted me. I suddenly remembered all those times I had been inexplicably followed. And it all became clear. Dominic was terrified and begged his mother not to harm me. His mother, already obsessed, gave him a condition: she wouldn't harm me if Dominic left. So, they staged his death. Dominic was taken abroad. For these past 3 years, he only slept a few hours each day, trying to finish as quickly as possible so he could see me again. His voice trembled with emotion. "You don't know how much I missed you." He spoke about everything that had happened to him over the years as if it were someone else's story. How he had to start from scratch, learning how to run a company, how he proved himself, and how he could finally escape his obsessive mother's control. He didn't dare to see me, didn't dare to contact me, all for my protection. He told me everything in just a few minutes, but I knew how difficult those years must have been for him. The amount of effort it took for him to stand before me now. I hugged him tightly, and he held me even tighter, as if he wanted to fuse me into his very bones. "Every time I missed you so much I thought I'd go crazy. I'd press the tip of a pen hard into my wrist. I told myself, I have to hurry. I have to succeed faster, or my girl won't wait for me. I promised her I'd win a trophy for her on the track. I couldn't break that promise. I told her I'd marry her. She's so foolish, she'll wait for me forever." So I studied like mad, slowly breaking free of my mother's control. And now, finally, I can stand in front of you. I knew. My tears dried, only to flow again. It felt like I was releasing all the emotions I had suppressed over the years. He gently stroked my face, pressing a soft kiss on my forehead. "My little firecracker, will you marry me?" Chapter 16. 3 days before the wedding, I dragged Dominic to get our marriage certificate. As I watched the official seal stamp between our 2 photos, I laughed and laughed, then started crying. Dominic panicked, trying to wipe away my tears. I'm sorry. I came too late." I shook my head gently, wiping my face. "As long as the ending is with you, it doesn't matter if you were late." At the same time, a photo started circulating in our circle. On a motorcycle, a slender, fair hand rested on the chest of the hottest racing champion at the moment. His veined, tattooed arm was tightly wrapped around the woman's waist. Hormones practically spilled from the screen. The photo was taken by Lucas and the others after the race that day. Somehow, it got out. Almost everyone we knew saw it. In a group chat, as soon as someone posted the photo, it sparked a heated discussion. "Why does this woman look so much like Ava?" "No way, right? Ava's the one with long black hair and elegant dresses. Since when did she have blue short hair and wear tank tops and shorts?" "Actually, this looks like how Ava used to be. The guy in the photo looks kind of like Henry." "Damn, since when did Henry get into racing?" "It's not Henry. It looks like some foreign racer." "I gotta say, these two look good together. But didn't Henry just say yesterday, while drinking with us, that Ava would regret it before the wedding and come back to marry him?" "Yeah, so Henry thought Ava couldn't live without him. Turns out, she was using him as a stand-in the whole time." I was in the wedding room, trying on the wedding dress that Dominic had custom-made and flown in. Then, Henry called me. "Ava, who is he?" I was adjusting the hem of my dress, and Dominic answered for me. He looked at me, his lazy smile playful as he spoke in a casual tone. "Hey, X, let me introduce myself, I'm her legal husband." Chapter 17. Dominic and I met up with everyone on the mountain road. We rode our beloved bikes, racing together to the top of the mountain. Everyone was laughing and crying at the same time. He held my hand tightly from behind. It felt like we were 18 again. "In that summer, my little firecracker, want to run away with me?" Tears welled up in my eyes. This time, I held his hand tight, running together through the summer night. I stood on my tiptoes and kissed the corner of his lips. But he took control, gripping my waist tightly and leaning in for a deep kiss. That familiar, soft, wild sensation couldn't compare to the joy of finding something you thought was lost. Yet it made up for our boiling, passionate, romantic, broken, and unfinished youth. I don't know if we saved each other. All I know is that in every journey we embark on, love is always the greatest truth. Chapter 18. We partied all night at Lucas' shop and didn't fall asleep until dawn. When I woke up, everyone was sprawled out in corners, fast asleep. I loved it, this atmosphere, this moment. I decided to step out and feel the mountain breeze. But unexpectedly, I saw Henry. He was slumped under a power pole, surrounded by cigarette butts and empty bottles. I didn't know when he got there. I didn't know how long he had been waiting. I didn't even know what he was planning. I didn't want to see him, but he blocked my path before I could leave. Eva, let's get married. He pulled a household registration book from his pocket. I didn't know what game he was playing. I took a step back, raising my hand. Henry, I'm already married. He froze as he looked at the ring on my finger. You married that racer? I nodded. He suddenly grew angry. How can you be so careless? You've only known him for a few days. Why him? And not me? Halfway through, he paused, his tone softening as he quietly stared at me. I haven't canceled the wedding with my family yet. How about we still get married as planned in 2 days? I shook my head. The wedding's not canceled. I just changed the groom. For a moment, he stood there, stunned. Then he laughed bitterly. If that racer finds out you were using him as a stand-in, he'll definitely divorce you. Eva, stop messing around. Marrying me is your best choice. Oh, Henry didn't know Dominic was the one I had loved all along. Don't worry, we're not getting divorced. Just then, Dominic's voice came from behind me, his arms wrapping around my shoulders. He kissed me on the lips. Because those who betray love are bound for hell. Henry looked at the face that so closely resembled his own. He didn't say a word. And then, utterly broken, he walked away. Chapter 19. 2 days before the wedding, Dominic and I were revising the guest list. We only invited our closest friends, planning a wedding that was truly ours. Amidst the chaos of preparations, I unexpectedly received a call from Elena. On the other end, she was softly sobbing. Can you go see Henry? He drank so much he got alcohol poisoning and is in the hospital. I was a bit confused. What does this have to do with me? Elena's voice was choked with tears. I always thought Henry was really waiting for me. That he truly loved me. I thought that once I came back, he would firmly stand by my side. For that week, he was with me. But he kept looking at his phone. I knew he was waiting for your call, but you didn't even send him a single message. So he brought me to see you, to call off the wedding, just to make you angry. But you left so calmly. You don't know how much he lost control after you left. That's when I realized that, in this stand-in game, he actually developed feelings for you. After finding out you were with someone else, he kept drinking, muttering your name. I frowned, interrupting Elena. I don't want to hear this. I don't love him. Not even once did I feel anything for him. And he doesn't love me either. He just can't stand the fact that he wasn't in control of the relationship. Then I hung up the phone. Chapter 20. 1 day before the wedding, Dominic's company publicly acquired Henry's family business. Only then did they realize Henry's father had an illegitimate son outside the family. But instead of fighting for the inheritance, he and his mother worked together and delivered one fatal blow. One of the most talked about details of that day was that Dominic and Henry looked strikingly similar. At the same time, Dominic announced that he was marrying his first love, and the wedding was set for the next day. Everyone finally put it together. The racer was him. He was the dream lover I thought I had lost but had come back to life. My parents were thrilled, thinking they had latched onto a new golden opportunity. But that day, I brought Dominic back home and told them, I have cut ties with this family. For so long, I couldn't bring myself to make the break, and I suffered internally. I felt like I owed them for giving me life, and I still had illusions about them, hoping for their care, understanding, validation, and love. But my arrival in this world wasn't my choice. Since I'm here, I'm an independent being. When I was repeatedly hurt by their indifference, tormented by illness, they watched from afar, letting me drown in that deep sea. Not once did they save me. Since I couldn't have it, I decided I didn't want it. In this world, not everyone is meant to experience familial love. Accepting the absence of certain emotions is part of the process of growing up. When I left, my parents stood in front of me. For the first time, I saw panic on their faces, but it had nothing to do with me anymore. Chapter 21. On the day of the wedding, I wore the wedding dress Dominic had prepared. It fit perfectly. I asked him, "How did you know my size?" He pinched my cheek, because a certain little one definitely wasn't eating well while I was gone. In his sharp, well-fitted suit, the wildness and rebelliousness of his youth were gone. In its place was maturity and tenderness. He gently hugged me from behind. I looked at our reflection in the mirror, and my eyes welled up. This day, I had waited too long. Far too long for it. Dominic lifted my chin and kissed the corner of my eye. My little firecracker. Still such a crybaby? One sentence, and the tears I had been trying to hold back came pouring out. That day, down the mountain, I imagined him saying this to me, but it was just an illusion. Now, that illusion has become reality. What was lost had been found again. Heaven has been so kind to me. I tilted my face up and kissed his brow, because I know there's someone who will wipe my tears away. Someone who will wait for me to watch the spring rain, feel the summer breeze, see the autumn leaves, and marvel at the winter snow. And so, even if sometimes I walk alone, I am brave enough to keep moving forward, because I am certain that at the edge of the cliff, the wild wind awaits, and the one I love will be there, telling me, "Hello, it's good to see you again."